Welcome to a football show Thursday edition. That is Nick Suss of the Tennessean. I am Braden Gall. And of course, we are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Nick, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good. Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. If you want to jump into the comment section, please do so. If you are watching us live, if you are listening to us on a podcast application of choice, rate, review, and subscribe. I know people ask you to do that a lot, but it does actually help people find the musings and the stylings of one Mr. Nick Suss. So please write a review. 5 stars only, of course. If you do not give us 5 stars, you are a hater. The Tennessee Titans lost all momentum and gave all their goodwill back in a matter of like 15 minutes of football. And we'll discuss whether or not they can get all of that back this weekend against what might be the worst team in the NFL right now because of injuries, what might be one of the worst games ever played at Nissan Stadium, which I know is very near and dear to your Geek Corner heart. I know.
Yes,
right, Nick?
yeah. I love that stuff.
Yeah, so we'll look at that. I know you've got some stuff. You've been talking a lot about Nick Westbrook-Akine. Are we going to get a hashtag trending on the social media apps about Nick Westbrook-Akine?
I can keep trying. If people care about social media, which please don't, but we can try.
Man, it has such outsized influence on our brains as sports fans. It's really wild. So, but make sure you go give Nick a follow at Nick Suss on Twitter, and you can see what hashtags he's starting to get going there over there on the Twitter sphere. I'm just not as active over there anymore. I know that's where this is being broadcast, and I know that's still where a lot of sports fans live. But again, you can get to me over on Blueski if you want to come on over. The skies are clear, the humidity is down. A lot less hot air over there on Blue Sky. That is for sure. So come on over. Plus, we had a huge weekend of rivalry football, just a really spectacular weekend of rivalry football over Thanksgiving weekend, college football, and we have a rematch in the SEC championship game. It appears that 4 teams will be in the playoff from the SEC. The question is it the right 4 teams, Nick? I'll ask you that coming up a little bit later on. I don't know how your Thanksgiving went. I know you're a little under the weather this week, so I don't know if you want to blame everyone that came into your house and sneezed all over your stuff, but you may if you'd like to. This is your chance to blame everybody.
I am going to be diplomatic here and blame the city of Washington, D.C. for getting me sick rather than my family. But we don't know. We really don't know what happened. Thanksgiving was wonderful. The turkey was good. And everything from there. I'm proud of myself.
Drain the swamp, my guy. I was the big winner. Like the Titans,
I'm getting a big glare for saying myself right now. I'm proud of myself and my wife.
There you go. It was you had a lot of folks in town. I had my parents and like one other couple, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law. They were in the house from about noon to 7 or 8, and then they went home. It was just the right amount of family, just the right amount of time. And Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue allowed me to be the big winner because it certainly was not the Tennessee Titans over the weekend. And frankly, there was, truly great rivalry games in the SEC and around the country, but not the least of which, of course, was your alma mater playing an extraordinary football game. And I thought about you the entire time. We'll get to that in a second. But I was thinking about you the whole time. I'm trying to build you up on Blue Sky because that's where I'm posting all my college football observations. And I had some Nick Suss observations late on a Friday evening during a holiday weekend, considering our conversation last week. But I was the big winner because everybody loved like my mother and my wife and my sister-in-law. I'm not to gender stereotype here, but they absolutely loved the sparkling rosé that Sinkers Beverages picked out for me. I walked in, I said, I've got turkey for Thanksgiving. What should I do? And they had a bunch of wines picked out that are going to pair perfectly with our Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. I walked in there. I said, what do you got? They said, drink this Oregonian, sparkling rosé. And I was like, sure, sounds great. Huge hit. Everybody loved it. Drank 2 bottles of it. It was great. And then, of course, I had stashed up in the cabinet from Sinkers Beverages a nice little Weller 12. You don't open those very often. And I had my father, my brother-in-law, and I thought, you know what? It's a special occasions, to quote some Saturday Night Live skits. And huge W, little taste of the Weller 12 for the father and for the brother-in-law. Huge victory there. And then everybody from kids up to grandma loved the brisket and the Shotgun Willie's Barbecue smoked turkey. So still, I just finished it like 2 days ago, Nick.
Yeah.
I think I got to like 9 cold sandwiches, I think I didn't get to double digits, but I was close.
I think we finished the turkey Tuesday, still have not finished the ham. So we've got some food. We did a good job of the leftovers. But yeah,
How long is it safe to eat off of that ham?
I don't know, man. I've been sick already. What am I going to do? Get double sick?
I guess you could, in theory. No, I had a cold turkey sandwich Wednesday morning for lunch, and that was it. That was the end of it. That was the end of it. And I like green beans are my favorite. Green beans are my favorite barbecue side item, and Tony's Magic Green Beans from Shotgun Willie's Barbecue are spectacular. Best green beans in the city. Go check them out. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue open 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Wednesday through Sunday. So go check them out. And of course, Sinker's Beverages, award-winning beverages and liquor store here in East Nashville. Sister store, Bluegrass Beverages, up there in Hendersonville. So 2 great locations. Go check them out. Okay. I want to ask sort of like, how has the demeanor of the team evolved from like an owner crying in a very important win over Houston after what felt like 2 weeks of semi-progress, albeit in defeats to the Chargers and the Vikings, but progress from the quarterback and the offense, and progress in general, it felt, from the team. Then, of course, that progress results in a victory over the Texans, and then it comes back and they give all of that away in a matter of 15 minutes. I know that we've had lots of time to react to that game, so that's not necessarily what I'm asking. What I'm curious about is how are the vibes right now? Let's do a vibe check on the team, the mental focus, the confidence, all the things going from growth and progress, win over Houston, total domination and ugly performance, maybe the worst of the Callahan era, against Washington over the weekend. Where are they now on a Thursday following that?
So I wrote this earlier in the week, and I'm curious which side you're going to fall on. So one of my takeaways from this Washington game is that I can't decide whether this proves that the Titans are capable of making 4 major mistakes in a game if they are spread out once per quarter. And the problem was that all of the mistakes happened compoundedly back to back. Or if the Titans can only make 4 major mistakes in a game if the opponent is also making a comparable number of mistakes. So, like, what I'm trying to discern, and the reason I'm bringing this back to what we're talking about the vibe, is like, was the difference between the Houston game and the Washington game the fact that the Titans made their mistakes too close together? Because they probably made a comparable number of mistakes. If you look at what happened in Houston, they had the long kick return and they had the pick six, and there were like things that went wrong, but they were spaced out enough that the team kind of allowed itself to chisel back and recover. Yeah. Or is the issue that Houston was making just as many mistakes as the Titans were, and Washington was playing a really conservative, shall we say, version of football where they were not pushing the ball, they were not making extra mistakes? And I think your perspective on that really determines how you feel about the vibe of this situation right now. Because if you think about football as a discrete series of instances of there's 130 or whatever moments in a football game, and if you win 78 out of 130 or whatever random number I've decided, you're going to win the game. I think if you look at the discrete number of wins in the Houston game and the discrete number of wins in the Washington game, there were still more in the Houston game, but I really don't think it was significantly more.
Is it sort of like gambling? If you get to like 56%, you're elite.
Sure.
It feels like you need to win 56% of the plays is what it feels like.
And so, like, again, these are numbers completely off the top of my head.
Yeah. It's science. No,
but like,
this is science.
If we say the Titans won 54% of the plays against Houston and 48% of the plays against Washington or something like that, you can manipulate the numbers however you want. Is the problem that the Titans lost too many plays consecutively? Or is the problem that the Titans were losing plays and the Texans were losing plays rather than the Titans were losing plays and the Commanders were winning plays? Like, can the Titans play winning football, or do they have to play not losing football? Or do they have to have an opponent who's playing not winning football, or whatever it is? And all of that comes to the question of what's the vibe? I don't think people know. Like, I don't think that this team broadly knows how it should feel about that outcome, because I don't think that
you're talking about the locker. You're talking about the players and the coaching staff, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Because I don't know if what we saw against Washington has to invalidate what we saw against Houston, in the same way that I don't think what we saw against Houston had to invalidate what we saw in some of the really terrible games earlier in the season.
Look, I hear what you're saying. I also, as a human being, subscribe to the gray theory, which I am just now inventing. That life is lived in the gray. There's very few things in this world that are black and white, maybe like math, but very few things are black and white, and that the vast majority of life is lived in the gray. And when you have 130 points of data on any given, 130 instances of action in any given football game, that it's totally chaotic, and the human element and referees and offense and so the answer to your question, in my opinion, is yes, right? Like, it's a little bit of everything.
Sure.
But I think if I had to lean a direction inside of that gray area, I think they did really good. And I said this on Monday's show with PK. I thought the defense did a really good job against Houston for the majority of the game, and in particular when they had to, things they did not do in critical situations in the first half of the season where they needed to get a stop, and they got stops, and that was really effective in the second half. I think that is sort of the thing, because I do think the offense, to your point, is very similar. Like, had spurts of good stuff, had moments of good stuff, made a couple of mistakes. They're clearly not an elite offense, not even a top half offense, but good enough to make plays to give themselves a chance to win if the defense also can make plays. The defense made those plays. The defense got pushed around by a very good game plan from start to finish by Cliff Kingsbury. And I thought that was the problem, honestly, was Denard Wilson. Not one person doesn't lose a game, as we've discussed, but I thought Denard Wilson and Rand Carthon were more on the hook for the performance because the roster looked subpar. The defensive game plan was not good, and they did not make adjustments on that side of the football. The offense, I don't know. I think they clawed back as well as they probably could until they pooped on themselves in the third quarter in the red zone with a chance to get back in the game. And they just like Levis threw the ball into the ground, then Levis fell on the ground, and then Levis didn't catch the ball and it hit the ground on like 3 straight plays. So I think it's a little bit of both. But I lean towards I lean towards they reverted.
Sure. I have
back against Washington.
I have no doubts and no qualms saying that the defense played its worst game of the year against Washington. Like, that's just.
Was it because it was cold in the locker room?
The locker room was fine. It was perfectly temperate in there. And for everybody who wants to,
that was you and PK, right? In the post game, just hanging out with Jarvis Brownlee.
Yeah, and like, Jarvis should not have said that. I think that everybody, including Jarvis, can agree that might have been an inside thought. But, like, look, Jarvis is a kid from Miami, and he was wearing short sleeves. I counted before the game because I'm a lunatic. There were only 14 Titans out of the 48 on the active roster wearing long sleeves. And I think only one offensive skill player, I think Tajay was the only offensive skill player wearing long sleeves. The team was fine. They were not.
It's going to be colder. Chilly. It's going to be colder on Sunday here.
Yeah. And
they better be prepared.
And that was like, it's not like he let off. Let's not paint it as like we stick a microphone in his face and he goes, "It was cold." Like, this was 3.5 minutes into an interview.
So I said this to Paul on Monday, and I want you to not to go back to the cold thing, but I said this to Paul on Monday after listening to the whole thing. I thought it felt like he was searching for an answer for why the team was either sleepy or lacked focus, or, was it warmups? Was it just the way the game started? Like, whatever. It felt like when I listened to it, and PK's big on like intentionality, right? Like, Jeffrey Simmons clearly was intentional with his hangover comment, right? Hungover comment. It didn't feel like Brownlee was as like, I've been thinking about this since warm-up. It was cold, and everybody around me was complaining about it being cold, and so cold was clearly the issue. It felt like he was searching for something, and if that's the case, then you probably shouldn't have said it. If it was true, then I appreciate you saying it. Probably shouldn't have said it. I'm assuming the veterans have talked to him since then, or the coaching staff has talked to him since then, because Callahan certainly had a very distinct response to it on Monday. Look, it's much to do about nothing, honestly, but it's one of those teaching moments for a young corner a young rookie to understand. Like, I can't just like go off the cuff all the time when it comes to responses, especially after a terrible performance.
And look, if we get into the psyche of a lot of players giving interviews, which I try to be really empathetic to how strange the situation is. One thing that nobody can ever say is, look, those other guys were much better at playing football than we were today. Because one, that's not a satisfactory answer. Nobody, but people want to be like, well, what do you mean? Why not? And two, there's like a matter of personal pride, and there's a matter of like not wanting, like you don't want to give excuses, but you don't want to also just come out and say, hey, we were bad today. And like
Sometimes it works though. Sometimes that works.
That's what Brian Callahan ended up saying, is that the Commanders just outplayed them. They were just the better team that day, and that happens. But like, yeah, I'm never gonna pile on somebody for trying to come up with an answer to a question that's asked to them.
To sort of put a bow on the like, I do think too much is made of like the vibes in the locker room and how people are feeling, even though that's how I wanted to start the episode. And that's because I am curious, like one of the things that this team has struggled with, admittedly, is sort of like maintaining confidence through adversity. That's one that we've talked about this season.
Yeah.
They've faced a lot of it though, which also, sort of wears on you for sure. But that I thought was really interesting was that Callahan and company, but in particular Callahan was very he voiced the like level of surprise that the performance caught him off guard with. Like, hey, I felt we had a great practice. The weather wasn't a factor in Nashville. Like, it didn't seem like any of that stuff. Like, it felt like they were hit by a bus in the first quarter and that they weren't expecting it. And that's the sort of like that's where Simmons probably was prepared with his answer. And I'm curious. And maybe vibes, vibes is sort of an overused cliche now on the internet, but like really what I want to know is like, have they learned from their moments of adversity? And do you feel that are they better equipped to handle responding to the adversity this week, being around them, than when they had those moments against Chicago or again, really early in the season that were like atrocious adversity, right? Do you feel that, has it changed at any point during the season? Like, do they feel more equipped to handle it now?
This is one where I have to admit I was not in the locker room yesterday because of sick, so I cannot tell you exactly how they were reacting yesterday. But I can say,
why didn't you go in there and give them all the flu so that they could all miss the game on Sunday?
Because I'm a little bit more considerate, like only 1% more considerate than that.
Fair enough.
But I do think if you're talking about the way this team has grown when it comes to responding to this stuff, I think two of the instances that come to mind for me are a moment against Minnesota and a moment against Houston that kind of showed to me that there has been a little bit of growth in this regard. Against Minnesota, there was the moment after. So Will throws the 98-yard touchdown. Minnesota comes back, scores a 5-play touchdown drive. And just like when it seemed the Titans were going to come back in the game, Minnesota stomped them back down. And that's the point where, in the past, the Titans had completely crumbled. All accounts are the players look at each other on the sideline and say, okay, now it's our time to respond. Will goes out and throws a 22-yard pass to Calvin Ridley down the sideline. Look, we're still playing. That was the first moment. The second one was the throw to Chig in Houston, where the Titans had kind of coughed up this lead and looked like a team that was going to forfeit a big opportunity, and they came out and they called a good play and they knew how to execute it and they ran it well, and they kind of responded in that regard. We're starting to see a little bit of that second half response. So if the question is, are they equipped to do it? Yes, I think the offense is. Is the defense? I don't know. That's really tricky to say. I mean, if you want to play a fun but sad game of let's just trade off naming Titans linebackers who have gotten hurt and or are not on the team anymore this season, I think we could probably get to 8. Like, that does play a factor, as does the fact that your 3 biggest acquisitions in the secondary this season, I believe, have played a total of 3 games together.
Yeah, it's bad.
And like, there are some things that happen to this defense that were not expected to happen. But also there are some things that, like Jeffrey Simmons and Tavondre Sweat were still there and the Commanders ran like crazy. So there's the excused, there is the unexcused. Do we think the defense is capable of not folding in a big moment? those are the questions we haven't really seen this year.
Well, and they should get an opportunity to rebound against a backup. Once again, yet another backup quarterback coming to Nissan Stadium, but two very good running backs behind him. And there's some weapons that have done damage against this Titans team over the years. I mean, Evan Ingram has like abused this Titans football team. And so there's plenty of weapons on there. I don't know if Mac Jones can get him the football, but there's plenty of weapons. And the running game, Bigsby and Etienne are both very good. The defense is we'll get to the matchup a little bit more in just a second, but the defense is not one of the few that's not pressuring the quarterback as much as the Titans are this year. So we'll get to all that coming up in just a second. I do think I think that the overall records of the teams being among the worst in Titans games and Nissan Stadium history, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago on the show when the Patriots were in town.
Right.
So we'll go back to that here coming up in a second. It feels, I know there's probably a cross section of the Titans fan base that wants them to lose because this allows them to, because it's against the Jags, it allows them to make like kind of a 2-game jump in the draft standings, right? Higher up the draft board. I think that's a ridiculous argument, because what you really want here is for Brian Callahan and staff and team and players and locker room to be good next year. And if you want them to be good next year, you need some confidence, some growth. You need the culture building beneath the surface, whatever phrase you want to use. It has to be a victory over a depleted rival in the division at home. This is one of those you have to win, and it feels very important to me. Maybe I'm putting too much emphasis on a really awful football game, but like it feels very important to me as an observer. Like if you want to feel like you have any confidence in this organization next year, this is one of those games where you probably need to put a stamp on it a little bit, I feel like.
And if you want to play the game that maybe it's too simple, but the game of how many players away do you think the Titans are from being where they want to be? I would think the answer is 6 or 7, realistically. That winning this game is better than losing this game. If you think that the players you have can become those guys, it's better to do that than it is to prove that the guys you have can't be those guys and go get one extra guy. Yeah. So I am definitely team not this year. Don't root for the loss.
If this team is bad next year and they're awful and Brian Callahan's on the hot seat and Rand Carthon's on the hot seat and there's an indictment coming for so many things, an even bigger cleaning of house coming at the end of next season, then you can go get Arch Manning. That's fine. But right, there's not that piece in this draft right now, and I don't. And here's the other thing we're going to learn. I think a big part of this last 5 games is so far, Will Levis has done what I think is required of him to earn the opportunity to be the lead starter next year. Does all that make sense?
Do you want to pull up Kenneth's comment real quick so we can use this metaphor to talk about it?
Kenneth says, need help. Feels like believing in Levis is the equivalent of believing Lucy won't pull the football away from Charlie Brown trying to kick it. Lucy is Levis. Titans media fans are Charlie Brown. Okay.
All right. I can see how you could arrive at that conclusion. I don't necessarily know what Will has done to pull the football away in the last 4 weeks. I definitely do know what he did in the first 4 weeks. But it's such a tricky situation, because if we're funneling it all down to you can't win in the NFL if you don't have an elite quarterback, which, sure, let's take that as gospel. Is Will proving that he can be an elite quarterback? I don't think that even at his best yet he has proven he's going to be a top 10 guy. But is he proving that he can build to being that guy someday? I don't know. I really don't know, you guys. The question is, do you have enough confidence that he can keep getting better, or is this the best? I don't know. It's such a tricky situation of like, are we at a 7 yet?
Hang on. The progressometer is what Ed Henry's comment is saying. He's asking about the Will Levis progressometer. I want you to hold off on that, because I want to tell everybody, in case you need this, this is hypothetical information for you Titans fans on Sunday around noon. Hypothetically, should you need a beverage while watching one of the worst games in Nissan Stadium history from a record standpoint, I've got a place for you to go. And you don't even have to leave your house. You can just search Uber Eats, Sinkers Beverages, and they will deliver that beverage right to your house, whatever type of beverage you want. If it's cold frosty beer, they've got the best retail beer fridge in the city, as voted on by you, the Nashvillians. Craft beer from all over the place, man. You got East Nashville Beer Works, Bearded Iris, Tennessee Brew Works. You guys name it, they've got the best local beers right there, as voted on. It's science. It was voted on by you. But if you like bourbon, if you like tequila, if you like wine, if you like all the other non-alc stuff, THC stuff, they can deliver it right to your house. Search Uber Eats, Sinkers Beverages. They will take care of your sorrows. Even if they're winning, you might need a beverage on Sunday afternoon. And, of course, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue open from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. Wednesday through Sunday. The best brisket in the city, full stop, no notes. That's it. Best brisket in the city. My mother and father, who no longer eat meat, God bless them, as they're getting older and trying to be healthier. My dad likes to cheat every now and then, you know.
Sure.
So he walks over from the dinner table after eating a plate of not meat. He walks over and I said, "Dad, did you try the brisket, man, from Shotgun Willie's Barbecue?" And he goes, "No, I got to try that." I unwrap the foil, I break him off a little piece, and he says, "Oh my God, that's good." So even the vegetarian says he loves.
I do love that in your stories you talk like the character from Community who is a Subway ad. Where
I feel like that's not a compliment.
Have you tried the brisket from Shotgun Willie's Barbecue? You're even doing ad reads on Thanksgiving night when there's not a camera in front of your face.
I said that out loud, and I was like, you guys know I didn't actually say Shotgun Willie's Barbecue to my dad in that sentence, right?
I am so hopeful that you actually did.
Now, no, what happens is you do that, and he goes, "Whoa, where's this from?" And you go, "Oh, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue." You know.
And you look at him, and you're like, "You can visit SGWBBQ."
You want to go to the strangest URL in the city? No, it was big hit, and you might need some beverages and some smoked meats on Sunday. So Sinkers and Shotgun Willie's. There you go. All right, Will Levis progress-o-meter. Yeah. What is number 7? And is he there yet?
Those who need a refresher. 5 was he is who we already thought he was. 6 is he's not on track to be a superstar, but he's proving he can get the job done with the talent around him. 7 is he's clearly learning what it takes on the fly, and by this time next year, he might be fully formed. And 8 was he's definitely better than his teammates and any other veteran or newcomer the Titans could add next year.
I'm definitely
not at 8.
Definitely not at 8.
7?
I'm not there to 7 yet.
I don't think I am either.
I think this weekend is his chance. Have you asked Will Levis? Does he know that this is his opportunity to get to a 7 on the Will Levis progress-o-meter? Have you talked to him yet about this?
I have not specifically shoved the progress-o-meter in Will's face. I have not shown him the gifs of people replying.
You need a little Will Levis cutout, and then you need to build a little meter where you can like move the little player. I've
thought about that, but like my level of tech savvy is. I don't know if I could pull that off.
No. This is arts and crafts, real life.
Oh, then definitely worse.
Oh, really?
Yeah, definitely worse. Side story. Sorry, I'm getting distracted here.
Yeah, let's go.
I moved states in 3rd grade, and I will always remember that my 3rd grade teacher on my last day of school said there are 3 things that I'm always going to remember about you. 1, how good you were at spelling tests. 2, how you tripped over your book bag every single day before class started. And 3, how you are the worst arts and crafts student I have ever had.
Oh my God, it's 2 really bad ones and 1 positive one.
Terrible. I was really good at spelling tests.
No, I believe you, but like there wasn't a second good thing the teacher could say about you.
I think that it was very much do a roast.
How did you
knock this 8-year-old down a peg?
How did you become a captain on the offensive line where you have to pull as like a guard and not trip over a book bag? How did you do that?
Brother, if sports were all about how quick your hands were, I'd be great. But the second you have to incorporate your lower body.
Right.
I was a backside tackle in a wing T offense.
Which is most sports though. You know.
So the only thing I had to do when I played offensive line was do a backside seal block every single play. Wing T, the ball was going the other direction.
Okay.
I did nothing. So I tripped over my backpack every single day, and still do most days trip over something. The number of days where my toe isn't stubbed is much lower than the number of days where it is. But never mind. Nevertheless,
no. There's a lot of conflict in this, because you said as long as it's stuff with your hands, that's great. But that would be the vast majority of arts and crafts. So there's
no. I can move my hands quickly. That doesn't mean they know where they're going.
So a lot of tension in this conversation, in this story.
When I was in kindergarten, my parents went in for their first parent-teacher conference, and the only grade that I did not get an E for exceeds expectations on was gross motor skills. So I was good at everything except for moving.
It's a big one. What I find interesting is, what I find really fascinating as someone who's just now been to, my daughters are in second and first grade, so I've been to now, like, whatever it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 parent teacher conferences total for 2 kids.
Sure.
If my math is correct there. And I don't think there is one of the, I don't think there's a singular thing that my wife and I have taken out of any of those conferences in which they would remember what was happening at the parent teacher conference when they are however old you are now.
Yeah, no, I come from a family.
To me, what's weird is that you know what happened at a kindergarten parent teacher conference. That's what's weird to me.
When you grew up your entire life having to hear your father tell the story, they told me my son couldn't play sports.
Fair. Sounds like a Yankees fan. Yeah,
a little bit. I don't know why I made my dad George Costanza in that story.
Yeah,
but
all right. Will Levis progress-o-meter. I am not to a 7 yet. I do think I think if he plays well against a bad team at home in a situation that we are not calling must win, but like, if you want to prove to us that next year could be, you want to have confidence in next season, this is one of those you got to play well and you got to win. And I might be willing to move him to a 7. Can you read what 7 is on the progress-o-meter again? Do you have
let
that?
Me pull it back up.
Can you call that up very quickly? Because I think he's still at a 6.
Last refresher. 6 is he's not on track to be a superstar, but he's proving he can get the job done with talent around him. And 7 is he's clearly learning what it takes on the fly, and by this time next year, he might be fully formed. I think the question is, what is fully formed look like for Will Levis? Like, not to play the let's give him a comp game, because I know player comps can get really messy. But like, I remember my best case scenario for him when he was coming out of college was like, best case scenario, he can be a Matthew Stafford type, like absolute top ceiling.
Matt Stafford is the comp.
If that's the comp, can he be Matt Stafford next year? No. Like, I don't think that he's on track to do that yet. But if we're saying the comp isn't about his ceiling, the comp is about who he can be on a play-to-play, game-to-game basis, can he be a fully formed version of Will Levis by next year? Potentially. I think so.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the tricky part about 7.
A little bit more development from the offensive line, a right tackle. You add a receiver in the draft. You put talent around him, which is on your number 6 there, right? With talent around him, is also doing a lot of work in that sentence in terms of rating him. What's fascinating about the Levis Stafford comp, which is always what I've thought he would be at his, if it all worked out and at his best, I think he could be like a poor man's Matt Stafford. The problem is you think about their journeys in college, and both. Stafford was basically the number 1 quarterback coming out of high school, 5-star kid. Will Levis was a 4-star kid, not a small recruit at all, big time name, not necessarily as highly touted as Stafford. Penn State and Georgia, respectively, is where they signed, 2 major big time programs. Stafford starts all 3 years, and they are a very good football team. They were not Kirby Smart good. They were not winning national championships, but they were very good under Stafford. 07, you could argue they might have been the best team in college football. They did not get a chance to play.
I know a lot of people who would make that argument.
And they destroyed Hawaii. Not that that's something you brag about. Unfortunately, I'm doing all of this off the top of my head, which is bad. For whatever reason, Stafford, and again, the much better, more consistent college careers may be what did this, but Stafford was clearly the number 1 pick. Like, he was clearly good at, like, the talent, the arm speed, the processing, the winning, the success in college. It was clear that he was number 1, and Levis was never really in that conversation. Did he do a lot of work at Kentucky? He did. He made a Kentucky program that we're seeing now is got some issues under the surface. And so what I'm trying to work through is why the gap? Where's the big gap in the two from a talent perspective? Because I do think physically they're very, very similar. I think accuracy and processing, not to go back to the two words that are sort of the thing with Will Levis, but that does feel like the difference. The arm talent is the same. The difference is the accuracy and the processing.
To prove that me going into Geek Corner is not a new phenomenon, I remember when Stafford was coming out, I was in high school, and I tried to create a formula to statistically predict the top 10 quarterbacks in that draft class. And I did not have Stafford in the top 10 based off of the stats that he put up in college. So, like, if you go based purely off of, oh, well, was he accurate? Was he throwing a lot of touchdowns? Was he doing this or that? Like, he was a good college quarterback who was surrounded by a lot of very good college players as well. But I think the thing that separated Stafford was the talents that he had coming out in 2009 or whatever that was were much more unique than Levis having those talents today, right? Like,
I don't know.
The skill set that Stafford had when he came out 15 years ago, there were fewer players who looked and played like Matthew Stafford then than guys who look and play like Will Levis now.
There's a lot of good comments in the comment section I want to address.
Sure.
I think you are underselling the best arm of our generation, Matt Stafford. I agree that there's probably a bigger gap between the number of players that could do what he did versus how many Josh Allens we have now, which is also a very big comp for Will Levis. A lot of people said like inaccurate in college, didn't win a ton of games, played at a smaller school, like some of the like athletic 6'4".
But that's what I'm saying. Like, that's like Stafford was more of a unicorn back then. Like, if we're saying the comp is that they have very similar talent, there were fewer people who had that kind of similar talent back then.
I don't know how many people have the arm that Will Levis has. I mean,
in Levis's own draft class, there was another player who was constantly argued had a better arm with Anthony Richardson.
I mean, Bryce Young, if we're talking accuracy, I agree. If we're talking power, Stafford Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, not even close.
No, that's why I said
I think, okay, maybe I see what you're saying. I'm just trying to work through the gap between the two, Levis and Stafford.
There's a lot of reasons. Like, it's not just what I'm saying.
Right. All right. I feel what you're saying. Okay, I think I'm on board with what you're saying. I think you've got me there. All right, so Chef says let's work through a few of these comments. What's the Levis backup plan, because he has the same likelihood of killing the team next year as this year? Here's my order of operations very quickly, and you can answer this question too. Number one, I would say bring in a veteran backup that's maybe a little bit better than Mason Rudolph to give him an opportunity to compete. That's a really good backup plan for next year if you need to pull Levis, bench Levis, whatever, if he's not the answer. Otherwise, then you have a draft pick following next season that if he's terrible and the team doesn't progress, you don't know who's going to be making that pick, but it could be a top 3 pick, and that could easily be where you go get your quarterback. So that, to me, that's your backup plan there.
Yeah, I think that we're just going to have to stretch the definition of veteran a little bit, because I think that the biggest names on the quarterback market among free agents are going to be guys like Trey Lance, guys like Zach Wilson, who are retreads. And then you have guys like Drew Lock, who, again, is he better than Mason Rudolph? Is he in the same tier? That's the question. Are any of these guys better than Mason Rudolph? Talent-wise, probably. Skill-wise, who knows? It's all. But yeah, the plan. I think if this team uses a day 1 or 2 draft pick on a quarterback, they are making a mistake.
You're talking about this upcoming draft, right?
This upcoming in 2025.
I agree.
So, like, the backup plan has to be go get a veteran.
Unless it's like a 5th round pick that you think is, just way above.
So day 3, yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Okay. This is a more interesting question by Ed. What is the criteria for Levis? Solely his production or his value, his cost next year versus his production, ability to spend elsewhere? I do think his rookie contract gives you a very clear window to continue to build the team around that position at very little risk, because no matter who plays the quarterback in 25, 26, 27, you have built a better team with ideally better personnel around that position, as we've said many times on the show. I think the criteria for it's a really good question. I have not like written down and articulated in like specific language what I would define success and criteria for Will Levis would be. I do think you're seeing the progress, like the major mistake. Now then it becomes a regular mistake, and then you eliminate some of the mistakes. You continue to be accurate. You learn how to manage the pocket and your pocket presence, which I think he actually, of all the things he did from the Houston game to the Washington game, I thought he made progress at managing the pocket. I think he did better. Because he was very poor against Houston in that category. So I think it's sort of, you can make it's almost like a Madden rating. You can look at like the 12 different characteristics and you want to see a little bit of progress from each of them. And maybe it's not enough. And maybe midway through next season, we're all just going, this guy's not it. Or maybe it is. And sometimes you just have a feeling and you look at a player and you go, I don't know if this is ever going to click, you know?
Yeah.
And so
not to be the Ouroboros guy, but like, the criteria is, can he prove that he's better than a replacement option? Like, I know that it's circular logic to say, in order to not be replaced, he has to prove that he's better than the replacements. But like, that is still what he is striving to do. We've talked about it on this show. I've written it. I think everybody else that covers the Titans has written some version of this. This team is intent on giving Will Levis until the end of week 18.
Yep.
They are intent on seeing who he is and making their decision based on who Will Levis is on January 8th or whenever the season ends, rather than making their decision based on who he was on September 25th. And like, to skip ahead to what Chef Ran is saying about he needs to win games, I don't want to get into pretentious analytics sports fan mode, but wins are not a quarterback stat.
No.
They have never been a quarterback stat. The quarterback helps win games, but if you are going to look me in the eyes and say they are 1-3 in their last 4 games and Will Levis is the reason they lost those 3 games, I think that is rather silly.
Yeah,
like,
no, I agree with that.
Wins matter. Wins are the most important thing, but wins do not happen because not of the quarterback exclusively. Like, it's the same concept as saying like, oh, tires don't matter for a car. Yes, they do. You need tires for the car to go forward, but there's a lot of things that make a car go forward. It's just the tires are the thing that you see on the
touching
outside.
It's the only thing touching the road every play.
Yeah. So like, when we're talking about needing to see him win, I think that needing to see him win is what we're talking about when we're saying we need to see growth from Brian Callahan, from Denard Wilson, and from Nick Holtz, and from everybody on the offense and everybody on the defense, and Will Levis. Yeah. He's not excused from needing to get better at winning, but everybody needs to do that.
I think maybe this might be a little harsh here, but like I do feel like I have a verdict potentially, and I'm just now workshopping this again, so don't like, you know, let me work through it here. But there are certain players, and Brian Callahan had said this, I think, before he took the job or maybe he had taken the job, but he said it somewhere else. He basically said there's like 3 or 4 guys in the world who are the system at quarterback. Joe Burrow, you know, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, you know, Patrick Mahomes. There's a handful of them, and you know who they are each generation. There are quarterbacks who are the system, but then everybody else is part of the system. And I think we've clearly learned at least 1 or 2 things. He's never going to be that guy. Like, he's just not. He's not that good, and most humans are not, and that's okay. That's not a knock on him. Could he be better than, and I'm going to use Joe Flacco here as a benchmark, because that's the guy who like is stuck in our minds for a generation about debate about, you know, is he a guy who carried you to a Super Bowl, or is he a guy who was able to manage a great team to a Super Bowl? And I think Matt Stafford is better than Joe Flacco. They both have a Super Bowl on great teams. I think Stafford was more of the reason they won the Super Bowl, and Flacco was less of the reason. So is Will Levis going to find himself in between those two? Probably. Yeah. Best case scenario, right? I think we've learned he's not going to be better than Matt Stafford. He's just not.
Sure.
But can he be between Stafford and Flacco? And I think that's where we have not yet learned that. And I think ultimately it's fair to ask, if you're a fan, is that the thing we want to invest in long term? Looking at contracts that the Giants just gave Daniel Jones after 1 good season, and now he's on the streets. like Jimmy Garoppolo was given a huge contract. because they thought he could be the guy that was as good as Matt Stafford. He wasn't. Like, there's a lot of guys that have been given the contract. And so I do think they have time before they have to make that decision. But I do think that's what ultimately, if you're Rand Carthon and Amy Adams-Strunk, you are trying to learn first and foremost is, can you be better than Joe Flacco? And if you can be better than Joe Flacco, you can win a Super Bowl. Full stop.
And then to the comments here about Rand getting fired or Callie getting fired because of Levis. This is a three-headed monster, guys. Like, this is not a situation where one person is going to get the other fired without the other person being involved. Like, all three of these people are equally involved in the health of the team right now. I think you could probably argue that Rand has had the most, given that he has the biggest hand in building the roster. But I think you could say Callahan has the most because he has the biggest hand in shaping the weekly game plan. And then Levis obviously has the most because he's the guy touching the ball every play. I don't think that one is more to blame than the other right now. And I don't think that any of us, I think that's the whole point to the most recent comment. I don't think any of us are making declarative statements about Will Levis. That's our whole point, is that we can't yet make a declarative statement. So I don't think anybody's to a point where one person is getting the others fired or any of that. Like, this team is not losing exclusively because of Will Levis. And I think Amy understands that.
Well, and it's obviously Chef, your title of your name is not Chef Brian or Chef Will, it's Chef Rand. So we understand your bias here potentially. I don't want, and this is where Kenneth comes in and says, I don't want Levis sinking Callahan and Carthon. And I think, to your point, it might be the other. We also don't want Carthon or Callahan sinking the other two either. Like, we don't know definitively yet which one is the one you need to keep. That's part of the problem. And to the comment you were mentioning, I don't know if I can even read your handle here. 14-leg parlor gambler. I love that. Parlay gambler, I should say. That's a risky proposition that the house is going to take your money on. How are you guys so comfortable making these declarative statements about Levis 17 games into a season? And I think ultimately the only declarative statement I've made is he's not Patrick Mahomes, and I feel very comfortable saying that he's not a guy that the system adapts to him, not the other way around. And I don't think. I feel comfortable saying that he's not going to be that guy because, again, I don't think Jordan Love is that guy. I don't think Jalen Hurts is that guy. You know what I mean? Like, these guys are like great quarterbacks right now, and I don't think Tua is that guy. So I think I'm comfortable saying that. I don't think personally that he'll be as good as Matt Stafford. That's my guess. I'm not saying it like definitively, but I think Matt Stafford has won a Super Bowl. Matt Stafford, and this goes back to our conversation. Every step of the way, Matt Stafford has been better at that point in his career than Will Levis. He was better coming out of high school. He was better at college as a freshman, better at college as a veteran, better coming out of the draft. He was rated higher by everybody. He's had a better start to his career playing for a god-awful organization for 10 years.
Yeah, and that's what
every step of the way, Stafford has been better than Will Levis. I think it's okay to say that.
Do you want to know something Matt Stafford did a lot early in his career? Lose.
Right.
Like, he lost a lot. And that's not to say it's good or bad, but like
Matt Stafford has got he's going to be top 10 statistically all time in NFL history.
Yeah, but that's more of a function of the era.
Fine, but he played he's way ahead of he's going to be way ahead of Matt Ryan and Derek Carr and all these other guys that are sort of the average quarterback of our era or whatever. So, and he did it for the Lions. He turned the Lions around, frankly. And here's the other thing that Matt Stafford, I think people don't give him enough credit for. That is the toughest SOB I think I've ever seen play the quarterback position, minus Brett Favre. Like, that dude takes so many shots. Every part of his body has been banged up, and he shows up every time. I do think there's some of that in Will Levis's game, to be honest.
But would I bet my job on Levis winning games next year, brother? I would not bet my job on me breathing oxygen next year. I do not make bets. I don't bet. I mean, I'm probably going to breathe oxygen.
I mean, you wouldn't be breathing something else.
That's my thing. If I start breathing methane next year, I'm out of a job.
Yeah,
So like
more than that probably. So
yeah, who knows?
all right. We were going to talk about this, but we ran out of time because this has been a really interesting conversation. The quarterback's going to dominate the conversation as he always does, especially in a situation like this where we don't know exactly what he's going to be. What's interesting is the what is it, 2-9 versus 3-9, or 2-10 versus 3-9?
2-10, 3-9.
Where are we at here on the worst record all time in Nissan Stadium? Do we know? Is
It's
this
getting
one of the
close.
worst?
This is one of the worst. Yeah. The worst all time. Let me pull it back up right quick in my random.
2000? Was it like 2000? Or was
The
it like a
worst. The
2008?
worst game was a
It was.
game at Jacksonville.
I
The
was going to say,
worst
wasn't it
game.
already at Jacksonville? It was already a
Yeah.
Jacksonville
It was
Titans.
2-12 versus 2-12
Oh,
at
that's right.
Jacksonville. The worst game at Nissan was 2-11 Titans versus 2-11 Jets the week before that. Actually, 4 days before that, since the Jags game was a Thursday night game.
Well, they got a chance in Jacksonville later this year.
So yeah, could be. But I will say, I looked this up yesterday. First time, I'm surprised. First time since 2015 that the Titans and Jags have played each other in December, where both teams have losing records. It seems like a much more common occurrence. It happened every year between 2012 and 2015, 4 straight years. Never since, and I believe not before that. So for as much as we give crap to these two teams for always facing each other as the cellar dwellers, that really was refined to one very specific era. Yeah. That every Titans and Jaguars fan had to live through, wherein both teams were trying to figure out if Blaine Gabbert and Jake Locker could be the guy. Yet, nevertheless, my favorite fun fact, those two never started a game against each other.
I mean, look, you had Blake Bortles playing in an AFC Championship game, Ryan Tannehill leading them to an AFC Championship game and a 1 seed. You had Trevor Lawrence leading them to a division championship and a playoff win. Like, there's more success with these two teams in the last 6 years than you think. But that being said, not this year. There's a lot of comments from Chef and everybody else in the comment section about some of these draft picks. Quinn Ewers, Drew Aller out of Penn State, Ewers out of Texas, Jalen Milroe out of Alabama. I think all those guys are – I think Aller has got a lot of pro potential, and he might move up draft boards. This is my quick comment on this. If you can get him in the 4th, I think he's a steal because he's a huge guy with a ton of talent. I think he's going to move up based on, like, NFL potential there. I think Milroe's a great player, but I think he's sort of like Michael Vick at this point, and I don't know if he's Michael Vick accurate or Michael Vick arm. I think he's Michael Vick athletic. I think he's probably more of a 3rd-round pick. I do think Ewers is going to move up boards, but he also needs to show sort of consistency in big moments as well. So I think you're not using a 2nd-round pick on one of these guys. No. You want to use a 5th-round pick, fine, maybe 4th, but like not this draft, not in this draft.
I say this is both the most positive thing and most negative thing I can say in every sense. Jalen Milroe has so many things that remind me of Malik Willis, and you can still harness that. You can figure out how to harness it. It's a lot of talent. I really like the talent, but the question is, do you want to go through something similar to that again?
I think he's way more talented than Malik Willis.
I think that they have the exact same skill that makes them so great in college and might not translate super well, which was I think holding onto the ball and scrambling a lot.
I hear you. I just think I think bigger, stronger, faster, better in every way, Jalen Milroe. So that's just my opinion. We have a lot of time to discuss that. Speaking of the SEC championship game, look, here's the only thing I want to. We could talk Georgia Tech for a second, which I thought about you because at this point, when I got to overtime and they played got to 8 overtimes on, I was thinking about you. I was thinking about how it's just a tie at this point. Like Georgia and Georgia Tech have played. It's a tie. Like, I know that's not what people want to hear, but it was a tie on Friday night, and I thought about you. Texas A&M was great. Obviously, Ole Miss and Alabama win. The playoff does feel like, Nick, that it's going to be Alabama. Right now, the Alabama's 11. You got Miami at 12. You got Ole Miss and Carolina next. I'd like to know who you think is better, Alabama, South Carolina, or Ole Miss. South Carolina has lost to both of them this year, but they're playing the best football probably right now. I think I trust Alabama the most, but I think Ole Miss might be the best. Where are you at on those 3 teams in the playoff ranking?
There is no way to talk about this without being hypocritical to an opinion I have had in the past.
It's okay.
The 12-team playoff breaks all of this. I tend to be somebody who wants to put in the 12 teams that are most likely to, if they win the championship, we feel good about saying this was actually the best team. Like, I don't want an undeserving team to win.
That's one of the first times I've ever heard that criteria since 2014.
Yeah. My criteria is I've always complained about playoff expansion because I think that what we're doing is we're moving farther and farther away from crowning the correct champion.
But that's not what a tournament is designed to do necessarily.
But that's what a regular season should do. We're not getting back into tie stuff.
I hear you.
I don't need to do this. But like, if the question is between Ole Miss, Alabama, and South Carolina, which one of these teams is most deserving to be crowned? This was the best team this year.
Committee got it right then.
I don't know.
I think it's Ole Miss. I think it's Ole Miss.
I think it goes Ole Miss 1, South Carolina 2, Alabama 3.
Ooh. Wow. I thought Alabama would be 1 on your list.
Okay. What has Alabama?
They have the best wins. They have the best resume. They've got,
their two best wins.
South Carolina.
Their two best wins are Georgia and South Carolina, which is also true of Ole Miss.
Played a tougher schedule. Didn't lose to Kentucky at home. I don't know.
Yes. Again, we can get into the question of like
Vandy might be better than Oklahoma, by the way. Like the Vandy loss was a much closer football game. The loss to Oklahoma was the worst loss, like in my opinion.
Yeah, and we can get into it, but like, shoot, man, I think Ole Miss played 3 one-score games all year and lost all 3 of them.
I hear you.
If we play the coin flip game, Ole Miss got very unlucky / was built in a way that they couldn't prevent themselves from getting unlucky, whichever way you want to look at it. But
how is South Carolina more deserving? Like they have not been the better team this year. They're playing better football right now, but they lost 27-3 to Ole Miss. They lost to Alabama. Like I don't know how you can make that. I
watched the South Carolina Alabama game and I remember who the better team was that day. Okay. In the same way that I watched the South Carolina LSU game and I remember who the better team was.
They were down 2 scores in the fourth quarter. South Carolina was.
They were. I know.
Okay.
And I don't think they should have. There's a difference between who the better team was and who should have won.
Okay. I do think Lenora Sellers, this is a very unique take, I feel like, which is redundant, of course. I feel like Lenora Sellers, the quarterback for South Carolina, got faster as the year went on, which is, I feel like it was a 4.7 guy at the start of the year. Now he's like a 4.3 guy. I don't know why.
He's a Justin Verlander type, just throws harder in the ninth.
Well, and I think this was Pro Football Focus that said he broke more tackles in the Clemson game than any quarterback in recorded history in college football by a quarterback in a game running the football. Just remarkable stuff by him. They're fun. South Carolina is chaos and they're fun to watch. So if they get in, I'd be excited. But it seems like the way the committee ranked Bama over Miami over the other two, it seems like if there is a spot, it's going to be Bama's in this situation, especially if Georgia wins against Texas, in which case the win gets even better for Alabama. So I do think that the rankings are kind of set. We do know if Clemson wins and Clemson pulls an upset, that will throw this whole thing into a mix and it'll knock out Alabama or Miami or whoever's in there in the last slot. But if SMU beats Clemson, then you probably have a 3-loss team getting in at large from the SEC. So we'll see about that. Is Georgia Texas lost some luster because they're both probably in, that it's a rematch? I know that this whole conversation about the regular season being devalued, I don't think it's true. I think TV ratings and the fighting this past weekend would tell you that people still care deeply about what's going on in the regular season. Ohio State fans still care deeply about what's going on in the regular season. But I'm curious because the Big Ten and SEC championship game probably will always feature 2 teams that are getting in no matter what, that this particular game where there's something on the line, there's a 1 seed on the line potentially for Texas and Georgia. Like there's a 2 seed, there's a bye week, there's plenty on the line. But I think from an interest standpoint, I'm curious because they've already played and because they're both probably in already, as Joe Tessitore told us 100 times on Friday night. I don't know. What do you think about the value of the game changing at all, or do you think it's still, we're all in, man? Both teams need to get that bye week. That championship still matters big time.
I'm going to answer this on a super, super micro level. But so my family was still in town Friday during the Georgia Tech game.
Oh, nice.
And as I'm sure I've talked about on this podcast before, my family has very specific feelings about the Georgia Bulldogs. Some might call them superstitious. feelings.
Mm.
My father refuses to tie his shoelaces on days of Georgia games because he believes that having tied shoes is bad luck. He was walking around Bridgestone Arena holding his 14-month-old grandson with his shoelaces untied on Friday.
Why not just put on a pair of Crocs?
It's specifically about them being untied. It's not about them being not tied.
That's dangerous.
I agree.
Especially if you're watching Predators hockey right now.
So all of that is to say, at the end of the first half of Friday's game, it was deemed,
He tied him? He tied him?
It was deemed that my house is bad luck.
Oh.
Because my dad is also a Miami Dolphins fan, and Thursday night he was watching the Dolphins in my living room, and they got shellacked by
Go Packers. Yeah, go Packers.
And so he left and went and watched the second half of the game from the hotel he was staying at. And obviously Georgia came back to win.
He left your house.
Because it was bad luck. And that...
I love sports.
And I get a call from him at about 11:45 or whenever the game was over. And it was a full apology. It was like, "Hey, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have acted that way. What this or that or the other." But like, I say all of this to illustrate, are you asking me if Georgia and Texas fans are going to care about the outcome of this game?
Touche.
Yes. Yeah, they're going to care.
Touché.
They're going to care a lot because the Georgia
Bulldogs
asking about
the
Texas Longhorns.
I wasn't asking about the fans. I was kind of more asking about like you as an analyst to look at the game objectively and say, has it lost a little bit? And for some reason, I kind of feel like it has because they're both in. But I agree because there's a championship on the line and because the fans still care about it, especially with Texas being their first year in the league with the chance to sort of upend the ship and knock off the reigning dominant program in college football. I think there's a lot of value there, and of course, the human beings care. I'm curious, like what did your? I know she's within earshot here, but what did the missus say when your father was like, I gotta leave? She's like, get out of here.
No, I mean, we don't need to get into more stories, but the first game she watched with my dad was the Georgia Clemson season opener in 21.
Was it 10-3?
A 10-3 game.
Gross.
And so since this was 21, we were still watching like outdoors on a driveway back in my hometown with a bunch of random Georgia fans she had never met before. And
how big is the hometown?
It's a pretty solid. We got I think 5, 6, 8 high schools in town now.
Oh,
It's grown quite a bit, but just classic suburbia. I'm dancing around. It's called Cumming, Georgia. It's a silly name.
Yeah.
It's a silly name for a place.
That's fine.
But we had a lot of people, and there were a lot of drinks and shoes and hats being spiked on the ground, and it's startling. But her dad's a Vols fan. She has been through worse.
Yeah, and that's a good place to put a pin in it. Although the Tennessee Vols don't have to play a game this weekend, and they're in the tournament, so hopefully
safe place to be.
Hopefully the rankings don't change much because you should not be penalizing a team for being better than everybody else in your conference. Tennessee should not get like. They shouldn't get a reward for not being good enough to play in the SEC championship game, is my thought. All right. What you got at the Tennessean? I know we're running a little late here, but what you got coming up at the Tennessean for everybody, all you Titans fans out there?
Yeah, should be a lot of fun stuff to write this weekend about Jacksonville. Check out Tennessean.com for coverage from myself, for coverage from Gentry Estes, who covered for me yesterday while I was coughing a lot.
Man, a lot of interesting article by him. About how much fun people are having watching sports in this town.
Yeah, that was a great one. If you have not read that yet, he did a great job with that. And then we'll have a lot of fun stories or not so fun stories, depending on your opinion of things like the offense and the defense and the special teams.
Yeah. All three organizations have changed coach in the last 18 months, and there's very little hope for any of the three organizations currently moving forward in the future long term. I think I tweeted that out, or Blue Sky skeeted it. I think I skeeted that out at the Vikings game. when I was sitting there with loud press box guy yelling at me in my ear. All right, make sure you check out the Tennessean at NixUs on Twitter. You can get to me at Braden Gall across all platforms. Sinkers Beverages, of course, your 4-time liquor store of the year. Sinkers Beverages, better than Matt Stafford. Make sure you go to Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, the best brisket in the city. That's just true facts, as my kids say. True facts, Dad. True facts. That's all I got to say about Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. And make sure you check out all the other great shows across the network. You've got a football show with myself and Paul Kaharski on Mondays. You've got the Hot Read podcast with JT and Stoney. You've got Music City Audible with the Justins. You got the Paul Kaharski podcast. You got the Gold Standard covering the Preds. And you got SEC Football Live with myself and Stephen Godfrey every week covering SEC football. So we got you covered, man. Lamestream Sports with myself and Steve Cavendish from the Nashville Banner, if you care about Nashville sports media and business. And if you're so inclined and you're not scared, there is a show that I do with a former elected official called Pod Bless Nashville that covers all the political ongoings and news and notes of the Davidson County and Metro Nashville news. So go check those out. We do appreciate you guys for hanging out and for listening and for being in the comment section. We do appreciate it. Rate, review, subscribe, notifications on, etc., etc. For Nick, I am Braden. Thanks for hanging out. Nick, have a great weekend, my guy. See you at the stadium on Sunday for what should be a spectacular football game.
Let's have fun.
Let's have fun. All right, everybody. Have a good one. We will talk to you guys next week.